is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
We are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Because together,
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
Hello everyone and welcome to Channel World Seed. This year, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will convene a food system summit as part of the Decade of Action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. The summit's goal is to launch ambitious new actions, innovative solutions, and to be a platform for transforming food systems to deliver progress across all the SDGs, many of which are related to food and agriculture. Because seed is the starting point of food production, the seed sector is engaged in the Food System Summit throughout the year, actively taking part in the dialogues and communicating its efforts to contribute to game-changing solutions. We have today a panel of executives of seed companies of different sizes and coming from various regions of the world. One thing that unites them is that they're among the 200 signatories of a seed sector declaration, which was launched as part of the sector's engagement with the Food System Summit. Joining us from India is Santosh ATTAVAR, chair of the ISF Task Force for the UN Food System Summit and chairman and managing director of Indo-American Hybrid Seeds. We also have with us today Natasha Santosh, who is based in Germany, and vice president and head of global stakeholder strategy and affairs of Bayer Crop Science Division. We have calling us from Australia, Donald Coles, president of ISF and chairman and managing director of Valley Seeds. And calling us from the Netherlands is Marco van Leeuwen, vice president of ISF and managing director of Rijk Zwaan. And finally, we have Michael KELLER, ISF secretary general, who is based in Switzerland. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'd like to start this live panel with you, Michael. We talked about the seed sector declaration. Could you provide us some context on this declaration? Who has signed it and what does the declaration say?
Thanks so much, Francine. I would like to start somehow to put us in context where we are. I think we are all facing an unprecedented moment with the pandemic, and we are still in the middle. And yet, during the pandemic, there were enormous discussions on the importance of food and food production worldwide. At the same time, we are celebrating the International Year of Plant Health, this year, which is important. It's not yet ended. And everybody is also recognizing plant health starts with seed health. We have the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables. And we are some months ahead of the Climate Change Summit, COP26, later this year. And don't forget, and you see it here, it's about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. We are all 10 years ahead to achieve together the SDGs. And therefore, this year's UN Food Systems Summit is a unique opportunity somehow to build together the roadmap also to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. Because what we are looking for is about the capacity, all of us, in our differences, in our diversity, to build a resilient food system. And the resilient food system starts with a resilient food production system. And what is the starting point of a resilient food production system? It's seed. Seed is a contribution and an essential contribution to build a resilient food production. And therefore it was natural for the seed sector, the private seed sector, in its diversity, geographical diversity, in its diversity on the crops we are working, but also in the diversity of its structure from family business to multinationals to engage together. It was a unique effort and inclusive effort to write down a declaration, somehow which is showing what we are doing on a day-to-day basis with the farmers on the ground, but also showing how we work and how we would like to work even further in the future with the value chain. And more important also, with the public sector, public-private partnerships, discussions on regulations, priority setting, it's essential. And therefore, what we are looking for as the private seed sector from around the world is to build an engagement. And to start this engagement, it was important that we have this joint declaration, which is signed by hundreds of seed associations also, representing thousands of companies around the world. It's about all of us. We need to deliver together. We are 10 years ahead of the Sustainable Development Goals. Let's build trust also in each of us, in our diversity, in our capacity to contribute together to achieve Sustainable Development Goals and make this UN Food Systems Summit, end of this year, a success, a joint success, which is building our journey to a resilient food system.
Thank you, Michael. Now, my next question is for Donald. As president of ISF, can you give us an insight into ISF's role and motivation in putting together this declaration, which outlines our commitments and asks? What do we want to achieve with this?
Oh, well, thank you very much, Francine. And Michael, you've laid it out beautifully to begin with as an introduction. But of course, it's about, from our side, commitments. But also we're looking for certain elements in partnerships with other people. And so just to list those, it's ISF and our signatories commit to support the Food Systems Summit 5 action tracks through our participation in the summit and beyond. We will continue to invest in science and innovation to develop and produce varieties that are locally adapted to farmers' needs, something that we do every day. Of course, do we want to invite dialogue with any potential partner that shares our goal of feeding the world's growing population, including multinationals, governments, regional authorities and public bodies. And we'll continue our support for the conservation and genetic resources and biodiversity that exist and are important around the world. We will also continue to lay the foundation to provide consumers with food that is healthy, safe, nutritious and critically varied. We'll continue our work to advocate so that farmers around the world are able to access seed of their choice at the right time and in the right place. And above all, we will commit to show integrity, to demonstrate openness, continue to share information in the agricultural space to be open to ideas, and above all else, contribute to the evolution of food systems for the future of our world. But in all good partnerships, we ask that our partners recognise the foundational contribution of the seed sector to reach the goals of Food Systems Summit and the Sustainable Development Goals, and invite and involve our representatives in national and at an international level. We also wish to support and need the support of the private and understanding the private seed sector and exploring and utilising the potential benefits of the latest plant breeding methods, including genome editing, which can and will accelerate improvements in seed varieties. We also need continued support for the adoption and harmonisation of science-based regulations for seed and plant breeding, which creates the necessary guarantees for farmers and allows for the safe international movement of seed. It's important to recognise that if the global seed supply chain breaks, this negatively impacts the food supply chain, and therefore we can't deliver for consumers. And this could seriously lead to food shortages. And another way of saying this is we want markets to remain functioning, including keeping borders open to allow the free and efficient movement of seed and prevent crises like COVID-19 from transforming into a hunger crisis as well. We also support the seed sector. We need that support to use genetic resources essential to new varieties. And I'll have more to say about that in the coming minutes. But we need to support and get the support from other bodies, such as the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture and the Convention on Biological Diversity. So these are our commitments, and this is what we believe we need in a constructive partnership, so no one is left behind.
Thank you, Donald. Now, I want to ask Santosh, who has been tasked to be the chair of the ISF Task Force on the UN Food Systems Summit. Can you tell us what the summit means for the seed sector and how are we participating as an industry?
Yeah, thank you, Francine, and greetings to all the panelists and everyone who's been watching from different time zones. Yeah, it's an honor for me to be appointed as the chair, but we have a task, that's very tough ahead of us. And I'd like to start with the term food system, as referred by the United Nations, is the constellation of activities involved in producing, processing, transporting, and consuming food. So this is really, the basics of the food security. So what we are looking at as an industry across countries, across borders, is to really bring good food to different people across the world, using our research, using our marketing, using our knowledge across countries, across policies. And especially it's very important at this time that we come together. One of the most important observations we've made in the last year or so after the pandemic is that there's been a revival of sorts in terms of going back to more grassroots level food. It could be old food in terms of older crops. There's a big consciousness on biofortification and also on, going back to roots agriculture in terms of the nutrition of the food. So I think here we might have to, as a seed industry, redefine some of our research objectives and try to help by bringing more food, more good quality seed, because again, it's about, the availability of quality seed. It's about access. And the same thing applies to the food. Today, if we look at the global situation, more than 600 million people are hungry, and about close to 500 million of them are actually farmers who are doing the sustainable farming. And they also have to be somehow brought into this, because it's not about selling the seed, but it's about reaching out to more people so that collectively as I said, as a constellation of several governments, policies across the globe, and seed industry is just one small part of it. But we will play a very important role since we are the starting point for the farmer. Thank you.
Thanks, Santosh. I want to ask Natasha. You represent one of the biggest seed companies in the world today, with presence in all parts of the globe. Can you tell us what this declaration means to Bayer in terms of how it aligns with your company's commitments?
Thank you, Francine, and thank you for inviting us to contribute today. And congratulations for the International Seed Federation for doing this. As Michael, Donna, Santosh mentioned, it's more than ever needed. It's timely. We have so many things happening this year, and this dialogue is very, very important. I invite everyone that is watching us to engage on the Q&A, or if you're watching the record, engage with us afterwards, offline. Reach out to me personally if you think there's anything that Bayer can support you as well. But answering your question, Bayer Health for All and Hunger for None vision is completely aligned with the SEED's declaration to achieve food security and nutritious food for all. Our sustainability commitments, our new sustainable business models, those are all in sync with our ambition to achieve and accelerate this SDGs 2030. We have embarked on the past 2 years and so on a transformational path. Transformational path in sustainability in many areas, particularly 3 that I want to highlight today, to advance climate resilient and carbon neutral future of agriculture, to find solutions for better crops with fewer natural resources used, and to empower 100 million farmers. But those are complex challenges. To meet those challenges, to try to solve those challenges, they are global challenges. No single company can do it alone. And that's the reason that Bayer believes so much on the need of partnerships. We need to think about partnership with public and private sector along the entire value chain with a farmer-centric approach. We need to understand, and I say that everywhere I go in all the dialogues that I engage on, we need to put the farmers first. All the changes will only start with if we think about the farmers. And farmers need know-how. Farmers need access to market and technology. Farmers need finance option to the risk transition. So we need to engage on a new era of innovative partnerships. And that's where I think the UN Food System Summit gives us a great platform. I invite all the seed companies, all sector to engage on that platform the same way that we are doing as Bayer. We're engaging there. The goal is to find game changers that will accelerate the SDGs 2030. So it's a chance to find like-minded organizations that will partner with us to solve the farmers' needs and to advance the transformation for sustainable food system. And that's only possible with innovation. So I invite everyone that is watching, all the private and public sector, to engage in that platform as well. This is what we believe, and this is what we are doing as Bayer with our farmers, customers, and with our partners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Now, I want to talk about the other part of the declaration, which talks about our sector's asks. Marco, this question is for you. Wearing both hats as ISF Vice President and Managing Director of Rijk Zwaan, can you explain to us what we as a sector need in order to continue contributing to sustainability goals?
Yes, thank you, Francine. I will try. First of all, thanks for inviting me on this interesting panel discussion. Quite some of our asks were already addressed by Donald in the beginning of this session, if we look at the declaration itself. However, before I deepen that out a bit further, I would like to mention also the fact that we as a sector, we really are committed to contribute to the SDGs where we can. And this is not only because we are asked, this is not only because we are challenged, but this is also and especially because simply it is in our DNA. And this is who we are, and this is also what we daily do. So in that sense, we are committed to continue what we already have been doing for a very long time. Now, if we look at what we might need from others, from partners, then I would like to mention in the first place, enabling policies. Enabling policies related to the delivery of innovation, the international movement of seed, related to access and use of genetic resources, as were already mentioned. That's, I think, in the first place, an important thing. Secondly, mentioned by Natasha, partnership and collaboration. We cannot do this alone, not at all. We need partnerships, and not only with public institutes and governments, but especially also in the private sector with the value chain, upstream and downstream, because the things that we have to tackle are pretty complex, and we need everybody to get scale and to make sure we have also profound answers to the challenges that we are faced with. And in the last place, I would say it's super important to have a common vision. And I think this United Nations Food Systems Summit offers us a possibility to develop this common vision. What do we want to achieve in 10, 20 years from now? If we have agreement on that, it is much easier to overcome short-term complex decisions and differences of opinions. So I think these are roughly summarize the things that we as a sector would need to make further steps.
Thanks for that, Marco. This next question is for Donald, Natasha, and Santosh. In the ISF op-ed that the World Economic Forum published recently, we said that at a minimum, we need better conversations around plant breeding innovation, protecting and using genetic resources, and regulating the international seed markets. One of the key elements on the table at the Food Systems Summit is to enable farmers to scale and to accelerate sustainable business practices. From your perspective, what can the private seed sector do to further support food production in a sustainable manner? Let's start with you, Donald.
Oh, thank you, Francine. And this is the good bit, you know, to talk about plant breeding and plant innovation. And that's the piece I'd like to address. I mean, not everybody understands what plant breeding is and what's really involved. So, but I want to tell you, it starts with this thing. You see that little brown dot there? That's a vegetable seed. Well, it's actually tomato. But packed inside that is an extraordinary thing. I mean, every seed is different. Tomatoes are probably roughly around 300 seeds per gram. But the seed that's on the golf courses you might play golf on, bent grass, that's about 13,000 seeds per gram. They're all different, but the one thing they have in common is they're jam full of hidden information and knowledge. And what plant breeders do is to figure out what that knowledge is. And essentially, we've learned to talk to plants in many ways. So you take that tomato, for example, and some of the tomato seeds, of course, are looking to produce something like this. This is a beautiful tomato that came straight out of my garden today. And what we want is a plant that doesn't want to produce something like this. This is a diseased tomato, of course. And what plant breeders are trying to do is to combine the benefits of different plants in order to bring all the best traits together to deliver sustainable production, more production, and particularly in the face of climate change. This is one of the great challenges before us on a global basis to ensure that we can keep ahead of those stresses. But essentially what we are here to do is to really give nature a helping hand. We're not in the business of redesigning nature itself, just to give nature a helping hand. And of course, plants and even animals, as well as humans, have all worked together in partnership over thousands of years in order to deliver just that. So that's the important bit about plant breeding. Rather than listen to all of the complicated parts, things that you might read in papers, plant breeding is not that complicated, folks, and it's certainly the sort of thing that we do every day.
Thanks, Donald. Natasha, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, thank you so much. I believe to accelerate sustainability, as I mentioned on my first answer, we really need to financially incentivize farmers by public and private sector on what they produce, but very importantly, on how they produce. Farmers need to be profitable, and we need to address the three elements of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. So we need to think about the farm economics. Farmers are really running a very complex business that sometimes, if you're a bit far away from the chain, you forget you forget about that. So it's a systemic approach. It's about know-how, access to technology, finance tools, as I mentioned. And I thought I'd bring two examples that we are very proud, and I think our example is very clear to answer your question. The first one is our carbon initiative. We are incentivizing farmers for adoption of climate smart practices, such as no-till or cover crops, but we are doing it now. We are walking the talk. We have a program where we are rewarding farmers in the US and Brazil, and we intend to expand this around the world. So it's an example of incentivizing of how they farm as well. A second example that I think is very important and core to our seed sector is that if we want to make a difference, we really need, and that's what Bayer is doing, we really need to explore how our plant breeding innovation programs can accelerate tools for farmers to be more resilient, as mentioned by the panelists, and of course, more sustainable. And an example of that we have recently launched as well is our short stature corn system. We are very proud. It's a ultra high density planting. It's a measured height of maximum 7-8 feet. It can be planted very narrow, 20 inches, 50 centimeters. It has a higher planting rate of seeds per hectare with no additional water or fertilizer. But I think what data is showing to us, and we think is a very good example, is that it can make by region, depending on the conditions, but it can make farmers more resistant to lodging. It can help with precision agriculture with easier target application of pesticides, for example, so more with less. It can help to reduce crop loss in field resulting, for example, from volatile environmental conditions. If you think about climate resilience, it enables sustainable intensification. It can support optimization of nitrogen and water. We are investigating if the system contributes to reduction of GHG. So it helps farmers on that agronomic performance, but with all those sustainability elements, they are core for the future of sustainable food systems that are environmental sustainability. So those are examples that I think are very core to what we are discussing today, and we are advancing with partners in technology and always putting farmers first, because that's what we believe at Bayer.
Thank you, Natasha. Santosh, would you like to add your 2 cents?
Yeah, thanks, Francine. What I'd like to say is, in adding to plant breeding comments made by Donald and also the innovative part mentioned by Natasha, the key is the biodiversity of the crops across the globe. And biodiversity has a gold mine that's out there, and it's been there for centuries. Man has cultivated, has improved varieties. And as a seed industry, we are also constantly striving to leverage the biodiversity. And for this, I think across governments and across countries, keeping the SDGs in mind, we have to ensure that there is a smooth flow of germplasm, and it should be more harmonized rules to access the biodiversity from across continents, because today food consumption is not very localized. What I mean to say is there are genes coming across continents and across countries, across agroclimatic zones. So having said this, it's very important that biodiversity is kept as the forefront. If we really want to feed the hungry people, if we want to have food security, this is the key, the biodiversity. And I personally feel that many of the people involved in the policies have to understand this. It's not about what they're restricting, but it's about what they're allowing for the greater good of the hungry people. And biodiversity can be really a boon if it's allowed to be exploited in the right way. And to put food on a hungry person's table, I think we must focus on biodiversity, and that's what the companies are doing across the board. There are also public institutions doing a lot of work in this. And coming back to my earlier comment on nutrition, once again, even nutrition Today, everybody's talking about nutrition, biofortification. The standard monocropping system might soon make way for a multi-cropping system. And there again, it's biodiversity, studying farming systems of sustainable farmers who produce only to keep themselves, alive, make the quality of life better for them. And on the other side, there are growers who are also commercially looking to do better and have a better life. So both of them need to be brought together. And I think biodiversity is going to play a very important role in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. I have a question for Michael and Marco, but before I get into that, I want to acknowledge the people joining us and posting their comments on social media from all over the world. Thank you so much, and keep them coming. We will address them in just a little while. And Michael, currently several important discussions are taking place at the level of the summit, which are strongly related to seed sector priorities like crop diversification, for nutrition and health and sustainability. The question on innovation to reduce food waste, for example, and to develop resilient trade ecosystems. What are your thoughts on these topics?
I would love to discuss all of them, and I think we should see also our webinar today as a starting point, that we are open to discussions on topics like crop diversification and others, but I imagine also Marco will take it up. I would like to take up the question on trade. And let me start, because it's essential. Resilient food systems need resilient trade systems. It is for us clear. And I would like to mention perhaps here also UN declaration from 2018, where it was mentioned about making trade work for environment and resilience. That means the recognition of trade is essential. And let me speak for the seed sector. I would not only speak about seed trade, it's rather about seed movement. Because let us keep in mind, when you take, for example, the exchange of germplasm, which is at the beginning of breeding programs, which will end up years later, perhaps in a marketed variety. That means from research on germplasm or breeding programs, which can be also research on public-private research, but between folks who are, one is sitting perhaps in Africa, the other one in South America. Seed is moving. Seed is moving from pre-breeding to breeding to production, multiplication, and then also somehow to marketing and commercialization. And all this is essential for us, because what is our joint vision? Yes, we have an important declaration here, but we have also a joint vision. We would love, that's our vision, our dream, make quality seed accessible to all farmers. I'm insisting, everybody's mentioning the importance of farms. Without farms, we cannot do it. All farmers should have at least the choice to have access to quality seed to support sustainable agriculture and food security. And I think, therefore, for us, it is important that we have a resilient trade system. Marco mentioned it yet. Seed is moving, and there can be regulations, and there need to be regulations also. But what is more important also, that all this is science-based. And I think this is also what we are mentioning in a lot of our topics is seed movement is essential. Trade is essential for us in order that we can deliver improved varieties to the market. And therefore, I think we all learned with COVID-19, remember the first weeks of COVID-19, wow, borders started to close, and there was important discussions to keep borders open, also for seed supply. And I think therefore it's important we could build trust on the importance of seed trade, because no country is independent in seed supply. We need to work together. And I think there are important topics also in the agenda of the UN food systems discussions, like digitalization. And I think that's a door opener to move forward together in trust, and resilient food system needs resilient seed trade.
Thank you, Michael. Marco, would you like to give your thoughts on specific topics among the many discussions taking place in this very broad summit?
That's a broad question, Francine. Of course, I would love to. I don't know how much time you grant me to take a deep dive here, but just to pick out a few. I think if it comes to realizing sustainable development goals, let's also talk about sustainability as such. And what does it mean? And how can breeding contribute to reaching sustainability goals? In the first place, if you look to what breeding companies can do, we can mention resistance breeding for resilient crops. So making crops resilient, making them resistant for drought and salt issues. Or in fact, we call that tolerance, basically. That's one thing, but just also resistance breeding against pests and diseases, and hence reducing also the need for chemical crop protection corrections. What breeding companies can also do, and I think should also be doing much more in the future, is to contribute in breeding programs for what we call orphanage crops or local regional crops that are maybe not so obvious for very big companies to breed in, but there is a lot to win if we support local farmers in breeding local or regional varieties. And that is, for example, what we as a company are doing in Africa, where we are developing specific adapted varieties for African eggplant or African hot pepper or leaf cabbage, Sukuma wiki. Then I would say, also related to sustainability, there is a lot of room also for seed-related innovation, and also innovation in cultivation systems. So think about the use of mulching, of small net houses, greenhouses, and the seed sector together with its partners and farm input suppliers can deliver concepts and explanations to those concepts that make life for farmers better and help them making an income. We also have to be aware that seed, in fact, is not the only solution, but is part of the solution. Other farm input supplies, as mentioned, are very critical. Access to finance is, of course, critical. Knowledge transfer, capacity building, all these things are needed. We need an integrated, collaborative approach. But it's also very important to acknowledge that we cannot do without local entrepreneurship. So this is not about giving aid or plain support in a one-way direction. These seeds are only going to grow if we plant them with entrepreneurs. Now, Francine, this is just only about sustainability. If you want me to share more, I'm most happy, but I leave that up to you as a moderator.
Thanks, Marco. Indeed, this topic is very broad, and we will need more than 1 hour to tackle all of the topics and discussion in the Food System Summit. But at this point, I'd like to open the floor to questions from our live audiences. And again, thank you to all of those who have sent their questions in. We have some very good ones. I'd like to start with a question asked by Dr. Gauri Sankara Rao, who talks about the establishing a clear role for the public and the private sectors, specifically in breeding and development. What are your thoughts on how to differentiate and what do they have in common between the public and private sector's role in breeding? I'd like to ask this question to whoever. Donald, please.
Thank you. Look, I love this opportunity because this is an excellent question. We've been addressing this question in Australia now for, I guess, the last 30 years or so. So the government decided they wanted private enterprise to participate in plant breeding. And of course, they initiated an intellectual property system to give us the framework for return on investment for that. But critically, public breeding will always have a role. It's not just about private companies doing breeding, although this is essential for the sustainability of plant breeding internationally. And in Australia, we've moved from all public breeding to now a joint effort. So there's a lot of private plant breeders, and we involve a lot of international companies in that as well. But for the public sector, they've moved to sort of trait development, the really hard basic science stuff that is difficult for small businesses to do, such as mine. So that's the kind of partnership that really works well. And one example of that is where we worked with the University of Melbourne to develop some new technology to switch off the allergy-causing genes in the pollen of a particular grass called ryegrass. Now, that was a successful project, working together on that really basic but fundamental science. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Donald. Is there anyone else who would like to add their thoughts on this, on public-private cooperation?
Perhaps just quickly from my side, I think Donald was brilliant on his answer, and many of the panelists as well touched on this. I think the answer is partnership, right? I think the breeding programs, there will be space for public and for private, but I think the partnership is the answer. If you think about just one example quickly in the banana sector, we all know that banana has been being actually challenged so much by a disease called tier 4 that can spread fast, and there is no obvious solutions for that. We partner, there's 22 institutions, there are 5 governments plus partnering to find solutions in 3 areas: training and prevention, biological and chemical methods of control, but as well genetics and breeding, to try to think about plant breeding innovation, future answers, try to think about solutions for that disease. And this can be only done by public and private partnership. And I think there are other examples, the work I think Marco mentioned, that we need to support local companies to thrive, and programs like in the long term, like the modern breeding project, where we at Bayer, for example, are working with ITA, with other partners to bring, to develop, to train, and to increase breeding capacity through this project. So I think the answer is, again, partnership, and I think there is space for public and private to really support the growth of this sector and local companies.
Thank you. I'd like to pick up another question now and jumping to the topic of food waste, which is a very important topic in the discussions now, especially in the value chain and at the consumer level. So what are your thoughts? What does the ISF stand on food waste, especially in cities? Marco, please.
Yes, that's a very interesting question. If we take it literally, what should ISF be doing about food waste? I think it's difficult to address that question to the Secretariat in Switzerland. However, if you look at the ISF members and the breeding sector as such, there are things we can do. In the first place, we can breed for improved shelf life. Making sure that produce which is produced from those seeds is basically surviving longer under harsh conditions, reaching also the other side of the city, so to speak, or at least surviving transport to those cities. That's a very clear breeding target from many breeding companies. Secondly, it's also really possible to breed, and this is maybe more in the Western world or in developed markets, it's really possible to breed for smaller varieties that are more adapted to certain size of households. So look at the snack developments, look at smaller sized cabbages, all these things we make more portioned, and we make things more tailor-made. As a third point, I would say it is possible, but then again, you have to partner, you have to team up with other collaborators in the private sector and also in the public sector. Is we can set up cold chains and foster better logistics also, because I think it is not about the technology, it is about making logistics just run better, making cold chains function better. And we have some projects executed also in India, and you really see big progress in a very rapid manner if you just collaborate on these things.
Thank you, Marco, and very good point on making robust systems and processes to prevent or to reduce food waste. And on this line of thought, I'd like to pick up another question on challenges. We have someone from Latin America, I suppose, Angel del Valle Echevarria, who's asking, what is the most significant challenge to achieving the SDGs? Is it technology? Is it resource availability? Or is it regulation? Or a combination of these things? Michael, I think this is for you.
If ISF has the response, I think we could earn billions. It's not so easy. However, I think one point we should remind us, because that's also in the UN Food System Summit, innovation and what we call from our side plant-breeding innovation needs to be part of the solution. It's not a problem. It's a part of the solution. That means what we're always saying when you take also latest plant breeding methods, we as the breeders, private or public, I think we should be able to use all tools available to be able to deliver. Marco yet mentioned, and this is an important topic in the UN Food System Summit discussions, it's a discussion about crop diversification. I think, yes, we all agree, but this is not just this, okay, let's now diverse our crops. I think there we need also to think how we can build crop diversification. And it's clear it cannot be done perhaps by simple crossing. No, there needs perhaps also the possibility for us, private sector, but also public sector, to use innovative breeding tools. And I think this we should have in mind. First of all, the recognition of the importance also of innovation. Again, it's not innovation for innovation. It's innovation to address different topics to support food resilient production. On harmonization, it is clear. We are in a globalized world. That's for sure. There will be not one rule everywhere, but at least what we are looking for as the private seed sector is consistency in the regulation. And this comes on breeding, this can be on production and also on trade. As I mentioned before, when we move seed each time, we have to have a certificate for phytosanitary measures. That means we need this kind of consistency, because we also, and that's an important message we want to send out, innovation, breeding, having on also for orphan varieties, this takes years. That's a long process. That's not from one day to another. And for this, we need also to have the long look. We need the predictability, and the predictability comes also with this consistency of rules. If we get this set, this can help us that we can contribute now to the SDGs and support the farmers on the ground with the best varieties, improved varieties, also concerning orphan growth. And again, public-private partnership is part of this.
Thanks, Michael. Now there's not really a question, but more a suggestion for less input-sensitive crop varieties and the need to develop these to reduce the cost of production and making farming more profitable for farmers. What are your thoughts on these? Yes, Donald.
Well, thank you for that. And I have to say, this is right at the core of our breeding effort, particularly from my company's point of view. For us, being in Australia, we have this amazing climate where we go from droughts to flooding rains. That's our favourite saying in Australia. And of course, we've had all of that this year right across the country. But I have to tell you that that's our advantage too, because the particular material, plant material we're working on, whether it comes from Australia or other regions of the world, we can use that as our resource to breed more resilient varieties in the face of those stresses. It's the environmental stresses that what we use as our tools of trade to overcome those stresses. Critical part of plant breeding, that is. Thank you.
Thanks, Donald. We have now a question.
Let me just...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Please,
just
Natasha.
to compliment. And we did not, it's like Donald and I are doing a partnership here, and we did not agree on this before, but quick compliments. I completely agree with Donald, and that's exactly, this was a great remark, and I think we all are in that trajectory. The idea is produce more with less. Plant breeding innovation is core, breeding is core to this, innovation as a whole is core to this. That's why I mentioned on my first reply on the first question that we need to look at the farm economics. We need to farmers need to have access to those tools. Those tools need to be less costly, need to be cost effective. They need to have it, and it needs to be part of the system. So we always stressing the relevance for innovation, and innovation will support transformation of food system to a more sustainable food system. And that's a lever. It's very important. If you think about digital platforms, from simple things like an app that can help predict weather better, to really sophisticated tools for precision use of inputs, as mentioned, precision use of pesticide or fertilizers. That's the future, and that's what everybody's committed to, and that's what the farmers need. So that's a great remark. I just wanted to stress that message.
Thank you, Natasha. We have a comment from Mr. Kailash Bansal, who agrees with Santosh on the need for mechanisms for free exchange of germplasm. But the question is, how can we simplify this with the existing international instruments which are legally binding? So I guess the question is how to balance the free exchange of germplasm with protection for plant breeders.
Yeah, I can answer from what knowledge I have on the matter, but this is a very vast subject. It goes across different countries and different policies. I think keeping in mind the reason we are here is because of the food summit, and one of the important aspects of this whole summit is to make quality of food available and sustainability. So for this reason, I think the governments and policymakers need to sit with the stakeholders and also need to look at the global playing field and understand how the mechanism works. Because a lot of times there's a lot of apprehension that, seed is going to come in, it's going to bring in diseases, or, some of them may be true. But what I'm saying is use a judicious system. You sit with the seed companies or other stakeholders, institutes, and understand what are we to gain as a human race by allowing this germplasm access, so that scientists across the board, in the public institutes, in the private companies, independent farmers, they have access to good germplasm. And for this to happen, there should be a smooth flow with enabling policies and safeguarding every country's interest. This is very important. I think if this is followed, then there'll be a lot more movement. And of course, also the intellectual property protection is very necessary for breeders who innovate across the board. And this mechanism also, you must safeguard the innovator. Otherwise, there's a lot of value destruction that happens when good products are innovated, and then there's a chance of it getting out into the wrong hands and getting multiplied, and it won't see the light of day. Whereas if it's in a protected system, it itself is an incentive for a breeder or a researcher to keep developing better varieties. And ultimately, what does that do? It benefits the farmer to grow a better produce, and thereby, it helps fulfill some of the goals of the SDGs and also along the action tracks of the food summit. I mean, it aligns itself.
Thank you, Santosh. Very well said. Is there anyone else who would like to add to this?
Perhaps one comment, Francine, and because it's an important topic, because we speak also about biodiversity, and we speak also about genetic resources. And as Donald pointed out, and I would like to emphasize this one, it is in our declaration, the importance of conservation, the importance of access, and the importance of use of genetic resources is the basis on what we are doing. And again, also for us, the private seed sector, it's important that we have also a clear, visible playing field, and we are insisting on the importance that we have the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources, food and agriculture production. And I think these kind of tools are important because that brings in the private sector and the public sector. And to deliver, to move forward in the right direction, I think we need to have these tools also right. And it is part also of our contribution to find solutions to achieve sustainable development goals, and also to contribute to biodiversity. I think that's always to remind us there are tools out there which are important, and on the genetic resources, we need to keep this in mind.
Thanks, Michael. We are down to the last 5 minutes or so of our live webinar. So I'd like to wrap up with the last two questions. There's a question on, does the private seed sector promote the use of locally adapted crop diversity or land races for achieving sustainability? And Marco, you mentioned orphan crops earlier in your intervention, and Donald as well. Would you two like to give your thoughts on these, please?
Yes, I can start if you like. I think in the first place, what we as ISF stand for and what we strive for is making quality seed accessible to all. But above that or beyond that, it is important that farmers have a choice, and to make a choice for the seed and the variety that they want to grow. Now, that might be super high added value varieties from international breeding companies, or that might be land races. And I think we as a breeding industry, we support everything in those directions. There needs to be free choice and availability. And as I mentioned, yes, in some cases, breeding companies are willing and are actively working on improving those regional or local crops. And we as a company, we've done so. We've even improved OP varieties, and there is a lot of willingness to support also this direction, because we have to remember, we cannot speak about just the farmer. There is a wide range of different types and sizes of farmers, and there is definitely in what we want to achieve also with the United Nations Food System Summit, there is no one size fits all. So we need to have a wide range of solutions, and yes, we can contribute.
Go ahead, Donald.
Thank you, Marco. That's quite right. And I'd like to draw everybody's attention to a new NGO called Plant Breeders Without Borders. So this organisation was set up specifically to concentrate on underdeveloped species in developing countries. And the sort of things I'm talking about are such as teff in Ethiopia and a groundnut in Indonesia. So this organisation was set up specifically to attract volunteer breeders to go to the developing countries, to work with local people, particularly the agronomists and even farmers, to teach them how to do the plant breeding work and to support them in that process. And I have to tell you, that wasn't actually set up this way, but it happens to be one of the smallest breeding companies in the world that supports this. That's our company. And Bayer, the largest seed company in the world, has a major contribution to making this NGO work. So it was set up by a guy called Anthony Ledden. And as I said, we've had projects in Ethiopia working on teff, Indonesia on groundnut, and there's been 2 or 3 others that have been embarked upon, and many planned in the future as soon as we can travel internationally again. We have lots of volunteers, lots of ambition. It's all about making sure those underdeveloped species and the land races, etc., can be utilised, especially in developing countries. It's not just the major crops. It's all plant breeding. That's what we're interested in.
Thank you. This has been a very interesting discussion. And to close this live webinar, I'd like to give the floor to Michael and to also address a question that was asked by Mr. Hassan Maki on how they can participate in support of ISF's efforts, and how can our members and beyond get involved in the preparation for the summit?
So it's massive. It's clear this whole UN Food Systems Summit is a massive event, and you see it's now also starting more and more at national level. Currently, you have 106 national dialogues. You have several hundred international dialogues currently happening. And then you have this official work in the different action tracks of the UN Food Systems Summit. You have also where the private seed sector is very engaged, the CEO consultations. That means yes, there are many opportunities, and sometimes I can imagine, because it's so massive, we are starting to be scared. Where should I start? And am I heard? Because I'm perhaps only a mid-sized company based in Zimbabwe, or I don't know where. The message is, no, you are heard. You need to be heard, all of us. And I think the important one, what we would like to call today is, first of all, that's just a starter today, this webinar. We will have soon, and I invite you yet all, we have our virtual congress, which will be called Our Journey to Resilience, starts with SEED from the 5th to 7th of July. We will continue the discussion, go deeper in some of the topics. But more importantly, also to SEED companies, SEED players, SEED actors, send us your stories also to ISF, and we can help you to promote these stories. I think we can try to connect you, to reach you in. But really the call is try at national level to participate in the dialogue. As Marco mentioned, there is not one single global food system. We have hundreds of food systems, local food systems, regional, national, all sorts of food systems. And I think we have all good examples which can contribute to build this resilient food system. Therefore, the call is go there. If you need any further information, get in touch also with us. And we are very happy also from the SEED side to receive the so-called perhaps game-changing ideas from what you are yet doing today with the farmers or the value chain on the ground related to the overall topics of the Food System Summit. Therefore, let's continue. It's about engagement and let's play the role I think we have to play also as the SEED sector in these discussions. Thanks, Francine, so much.
Thank you, Michael. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this first CEO Dialogue. I want to thank our speakers for their time and for sharing their thoughts on a vast array of topics related to the Food System Summit. To those who are watching us today, if you want to know more about the UN Food System Summit, well, this is just the beginning. During the ISF Virtual Congress from the 5th to the 7th of July, as Michael said, we will have a roundtable on the UN Food System Summit and the many roles of SEED. So do watch out for that. Registration will be open in the coming weeks, and it will be absolutely free and open to everyone. So don't miss that. In the meantime, keep following us on social media for news, updates, and stories from the SEED sector. And please subscribe to Channel World Seed on YouTube so you won't miss any of our upcoming live events. Take care and stay safe, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well done, Francine.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.